system of appetites is being deprogrammed. So she is born with a natural knowing of what she wants and what she needs. And instead of her wants and her needs being honored to whatever extent they might be. Now, I understand, once again, you wouldn't let a child just go get what she wants in a store. Obviously, I'm not saying a child isn't to be taught, but there was something about the way that child wanted milk and the profound intentionality that really made me, as a mother and as a person, feel, I think what needs to be honored here is that this child's body really wants milk. Now, I remember my mother saying to me when my daughter was a baby, a couple of things. First of all, she'd say, you know, Marianne, if a baby is crying, there's a reason. She said, think how hard it would be to be a baby. They can't do anything for themselves. They can't talk. So if they're crying, they're communicating something. And something she told me that for me as a mother was a great gift was you cannot spoil a child before they're 2. And I ascribe to that. I remember being in the back car once with a couple. It was a longer ride, and the father was driving, the mother was in the front seat, and this little infant was next to me in a car seat, and the infant was crying, and this infant was crying, and this infant was crying. And the father, interestingly enough, seemed to have the natural instincts of shouldn't we attend to the baby, and the mother was saying she has to learn self-care. At some point she has to learn self-care. Now, I understand the concept of self-care, but at that point, at that youthful age, what is happening when we are teaching children that their natural desires are somehow not to be had? Now, what does this do except turn you into someone who has no trust of your own appetites? Has no trust of your own desires. Like somebody who would say to me in my last book, you know, is about weight and weight loss and addiction and compulsion. And, you know, the conversation was, on the table for many people who would be, let's say, 50, 60, 70 pounds overweight. Well, is the key for me to just eat whatever I want? And in that case, probably not. Because if you are 50 or 60 or 70 pounds overweight, there is a probability, not a guarantee, but in most cases that's someone whose body is quite toxic in terms of usually chemically processed foods, fatty foods, sugar foods, etc., in which case your appetites are false appetites. Right? You can't always trust your appetites. But if you are at one, and that is what is so important about honoring the genuine desires of a small child, because their appetites have not been corrupted yet. When your appetites are not corrupted by the false desires and manipulated appetites of a consumer society, for instance, then it's probably true. You can't necessarily trust what you really want. But when we are one, with the truth within us, then we do have desires. And our willingness and our ability, which is in the best of circumstances modeled by parents when we are very small, to honor what our desires are and to honor what our needs are and to fulfill them as part of the natural order, makes us adults who can then trust what it is that we want. Now, the reason this seems to me so important is because, you know, there's a lot of conversation about manifestation. There's a lot of conversation, you know, from The Secret to Esther Hicks and Abraham and all of that. And I hear people talking so much about this idea of how it is that you bring forth what you want. And what I know in my life is that if I look back at my experiences, I have manifested whatever I gave myself permission to want. But that there have been many situations in my life where I would go from want to making myself wrong for wanting it. From want to thinking I shouldn't want that. From want to just assuming it's not okay to want that. But then I really would want that. And then I would go into a conversation about how to make it happen. Well, you know, desire is an interesting thing. I was reading an article once about the electron microscope showing what happens when the sperm comes towards the egg. And what the electron microscope has shown is that when the sperm comes towards the egg, in that very last millisecond or whatever, the egg that becomes impregnated rises up to meet it. I mean, how extraordinary is that? And there is something about, you know, one of the things we've talked about is, you know, how in male psychology there's this notion of male perversity, that a man is hormonally programmed not to give a woman something. Now, this is not about gender sexuality. This is just about sexuality, period. The masculine partner